So this is part 32 of our Wild Harvest Edibles series. Thou preparest a table before me, referring to Psalm 23, where God prepares a table before David in the presence of his enemies, and he'll do that for us as well. And a reminder about the fact that if there is anything here that you hear that is therapeutic or medicinal in nature, that you just use that as another tool in your toolbox and do your due diligence to make sure it's what is right for you, and partner with a health practitioner that shares a similar philosophy of care and of health and wellness that you do, so that you don't butt heads in your care and your philosophy of care. So just don't blindly accept anything wherever it comes from, and do your due diligence to ascertain whether it's going to be the best thing for you or not. Thomas Edison again noted that the doctor of the future will give no medicine, but will instruct his patient in the care of the human frame, in diet, and the cause and prevention of disease. And that's pretty much the same philosophy that Ellen White had, who brought the health message to the Seventh-day Adventist Church, and it's still true and being proved over and over again through rigorous, adequate science to this day. Tonight our topic is the Reishi mushroom, Ganoderma lucidum. So Ganoderma lucidum is the Reishi mushroom. It's found on dead and dying trees, old stumps and logs, and it's also known as the varnish conch. You can see how it's a very shiny, looks like it has a layer of nail polish or varnish that's been put over it. It can tend to get more dusky over time as the spores are shed and come and fly out and land on the top. After rain, it'll probably be shinier. But the Reishi mushroom is sometimes actually actively cultivated commercially in some areas. One thing that when you're looking at commercially prepared Reishi is that the best Reishi comes from the fungi that we see here, which is the full mature spore bearing bodies, as opposed to the mycelium. So the mycelium is essentially the underground fungal matrix, or in the log fungal matrix that you don't see. But when it's done commercially, sometimes they will harvest the mycelium and sell that as Reishi, when actually the most powerful part is the actual whole shelf fungi we see here, and also the spores. So the cracked spores are also a very excellent source of the beneficial powers of Reishi mushroom. So whenever you're collecting mushrooms of any kind in the wild, be certain of a positive identification. You don't want to get any toxic mushrooms. That being said, Reishi has no poisonous lookalikes. It turns out that all shelf fungi that are growing on trees are edible and or medicinal. And so if it doesn't even look exactly like this, it can have some beneficial properties associated with it, as long as it's growing on trees. I was watching a presentation by an individual who made the statement twice very emphatically that if it grows out of trees, it is good to eat, or edible, in other words. So if it's growing out of the ground, it could be anybody's guess, but growing out of a tree, there is some level of certainty associated with that beyond those that are growing out of the ground. I would follow up on that and just make sure that was an accurate statement. But that was interesting to me, having been looking at this particular topic. So the varnish look is most prevalent in young Reishi mushrooms. As they age, they shed the spores and they tend to land on top. And as they're there longer, they can actually live to be a very, very old age. And so that gives their top a more dusky appearance. You can see some different presentations of them here. One thing that's very notable about it is the fact that the pore surface, that's the underside, the middle picture on the bottom, is very soft, and it takes an impression. So there's a thumbprint there, and it will turn dark when touched. So it has a very indelible surface. There are some varieties of shelf fungi that don't have that indelible surface. It just means it's not necessarily the Lucidum species, maybe another species of Reishi mushroom because there are several different species across the world. The Reishi Lucidum and Suga, which actually happens to grow on hemlock trees, most common, are both have the higher potency of medicinal benefits. So the sizes can be up to 2 feet across, so that's quite large, and 2 inches thick. So they can be quite large, and also they can be fairly small. Many have a stem, so you can see the one there that is in 3 different lobes held by the individual there on the right has 3 kind of stem-like projections coming out from it, and that's a common characteristic. It's not always there, so you can see in the upper picture, but very commonly so. It may be twisted to one side and also varnished. The white outer edge is the leading edge. That's where it's growing. So they grow at the outer edge, and as it continues to grow, that changes color with age, and you can see some concentric rings that appear. So there are no gills present. Most mushrooms that grow out of the ground have gills associated with them of some form. Not all, but many. And there are going to be no gills on this, so that's an identifying feature. So there's the granulosum appellinatum is known as the artist conch. It's also medicinal and edible. And this is my first introduction to this, right, not here, but my first introduction to the shelf fungi that I remember it and actually looked for it was as an artist conch. I was at a camp out, and one of our people that was with us on the camp out found an artist conch and did a nice scene for us. And over the years, I've kind of kept an eye out for the artist conch shelf fungi. So it's medicinal and edible, along with the granulosum lucidum, which is the reishi mushroom. So this isn't reishi, but it is one of the family of conchs. So this is one that's commonly found here. We find the reishi mushroom in the Pacific Northwest and across the globe. So from an edibility standpoint, it's edible when it's cooked. You are not going to eat it raw. It's better to use it in things than have it as a main dish. It's never considered a main dish. It's very bitter tasting, so it's low in palatability when you're eating it in quantity, but it's great for teas and soups and things like that. The powder can be consumed if you take a mortar and pestle and grind it into a powder. You could use a blender, but it's like blending stone almost. It's just really, really tough. If you keep it more than a year, it tends to lose its potency. So it should be discarded after that period of time if you're planning to use it from a medicinal standpoint. So all the species of Ganoderma are edible and medicinal. And you know that they are the reishi by their bruising on the white underside. So the powder, the reishi powder, can be added to anything you're cooking. So the cooking actually aids the release of the beneficial properties and the nutritional properties of the reishi mushroom. So here's one way to use it. One way to eat it is reishi golden milk. So this is a powerhouse antioxidant drink, kind of a nice comfort drink. It yields 2 servings. You use a cup of coconut milk, a cup of plain unsweetened almond milk, a tablespoon of fresh minced ginger, a tablespoon of fresh minced turmeric, and you can use a pinch of black pepper if you choose. Many people say that there's a synergistic effect with the black pepper that enhances the uptake of turmeric when it's there along with it. We also know from the Spirit of Prophecy that black pepper has some other qualities that we're told to stay away from it. So that's something to take into consideration as well. A pinch of sea salt, Himalayan pink, that's also optional, but add some flavor. And then your reishi powder in and a tablespoon of raw honey. So combine those first 6 ingredients in a saucepan, bring it to a simmer on medium and occasionally whisking it, and then remove it and let it stand for 5 minutes. While you're doing that, in a blender, mix the milk and mix the honey and reishi powder. Well, hold on. In a blender, you're gonna mix that saucepan concoction that you've just created there with the honey and reishi powder. So those 2 things, the liquid portion and the honey and reishi powder. So blend that till it's smooth, and then serve it. It's best if it's served warm. I've had golden milk before. It's really, really good. My wife has made that a number of times. We haven't had reishi powder as a part of it, nor ginger, but it sounds like it would be a very powerful antioxidant, anti-inflammatory drink. So from a medicinal standpoint, therapeutic use, it's actually an adaptogenic herb. Webster defines an adaptogen as a non-toxic substance, and especially a plant extract that is held to increase the body's ability to resist the damaging effects of stress and promote or restore normal physiological functioning. So it kind of has a tonic effect. So restoring to normal is something that a tonic does. So it can be used as a powder, or it can be used as a tincture. So that's a double extracted tincture. So tinctures make available compounds that are both water and alcohol extracted. So there are different components. So the double extraction, one part of it is a water extraction, the other part's an alcohol extraction. Or you can use vegetable glycerin to do that if you're choosing to use it for internal use and would like to stay away from the alcohol. The alcohol is fine for external use if you wish. It can be taken on a daily basis. So it's an adaptogenic herb that has benefits in helping the body deal with stresses, the various stresses of life, healing, emotional, whatever different types of stresses, physical stress, inflammation of all sorts. So it's an anti-inflammatory, helps to balance hormones, helps to balance the cortisol hormones. Those are hormones that are produced when stress is chronic, particularly emotional stress or mental stress. It can help your body level those out. Helps to aid sleep quality and mitigate adrenal fatigue, and helps immune function. Actually functions as an immune modulator, which we'll see a little bit more here in a moment. So a double extraction procedure for lichens and mushrooms. We've seen this the last 3 weeks, but basically it's using your alcohol or vegetable glycerin to extract a portion of the therapeutic benefits, and then doing another extraction that's going to be extracting the water-based components of it. Then you combine those two together to have a more potent tincture. So fill a quart canning jar half full of the reishi. You can fill it to a half inch of the top with alcohol or glycerin if you're going to use it internally. Stir it and cap it, and then for 2 months you're going to be shaking it every few days during the extraction process. So strain the fluid mixture off and discard the reishi mushrooms, and then you're going to keep the liquid portion of it. Then you're going to make a decoction of the fungi, so either fresh or dried, and this is going to be the water extraction phase. There's 16 ounces of water. Put the reishi in and cover it and simmer it on low until your water is reduced to half. If it drops too quickly, and just add some more water. The idea is you want to keep that extraction process going for a while. Don't rush it. So cool that water, strain it out, and then add the glycerin/alcohol tincture that you extracted from above to the water at a ratio of 3 to 1. And that results in a shelf-stable tincture that has both the water-based components and the non-water-based components extracted, either by alcohol or vegetable glycerin. So some things about the differences between a vegetable glycerin extraction and an alcohol-based extraction. They are both used to extract the non-water-based compounds out of the vegetable matter or fungal matter that you're dealing with. Glycerin tinctures are actually called glycerites. You can just use tincture to refer to it, but typically a tincture, when used by that term, refers to the fact that it's alcohol extracted. So a glycerin extraction will be a glycerite. So glycerin was discovered in 1789, and its use began in 1846 as an extraction method that was an alternative to alcohol. As I was thinking about that, I thought, wow, that's right near 1844, right after that period of time. And it occurred to me that it was very likely the temperance movement and prohibition were in full swing at that period of time. And they were looking for alternatives for extracting the goodness from the plant modalities they had available. It's basically, glycerin is produced by hydrolysis of vegetable fats or oils. Basically, that's removing the water from them, breaking them apart. There is a difference in shelf life. The alcohol-based tinctures have a 4 to 6 year shelf life, whereas the glycerites have a 1.5 years to 2 years. So reasonably long for both of them. So in dry herbs, you're going to extract it in a 25 to 75% glycerin water combination, so the water is going to be the 25%. The fresh herbs or fungi, you can use 100% glycerin. So glycerin is not as strong a solvent as alcohol, so you're going to have less of the properties extracted. It's not going to be quite as potent as an alcohol extraction, but still you're going to be able to extract the beneficial qualities that the water itself wouldn't extract. And it's also better tasting than alcohol extractions by a long shot. So just comparing a vegetable glycerin extraction versus an alcohol-based extraction for tinctures or glycerites. So some directions for the glycerite. This is from Mountain Rose Herbs. Fill your mason jar halfway with dried herb, and then chop it well and mix it together. In a separate jar, you're going to mix 3 parts of your glycerin to 1 part distilled water. That's that 25-75 ratio. Shake it to combine. Pour the liquid mixture over the herbs and label it and date. And then you're going to agitate it daily for 4 to 6 weeks for your glycerite extraction. So if you use a fine powder, you might need to double filter and even filter through a coffee filter to make sure that you don't have any particulate matter left behind in your final glycerite extraction. So some of the medicinal properties associated with the Reishi mushroom: it's anti-inflammatory when used both internally and externally. Topical applications outperform over-the-counter drugs and many steroid preparations that can be purchased. So that's very nice to know. The key compound that is anti-inflammatory are the triterpenoids, and these are not water soluble. So these are only accessible via the tincture and glycerite components. It's actually beneficial for autoimmune disease situations, such as leaky gut. Most have an underlying inflammatory basis. That's what causes the breakdown in the gut integrity, and allows the molecules to leak across without having the molecular ferries that can ferry across the properly broken down nutrient. Large proteins get through in places where they're not supposed to, and cause systemic inflammation. So it functions as an immune modulator. So immune modulator basically is something that if a immune system is overactive, it's going to tone it down. If it's underactive, it'll bring it up to an appropriate level. So it functions both directions. It can be used daily in combination with turkey tail and lion's mane. So the first one there is turkey tail. The lion's mane is another type of fungi, but those can be used in combination. Particularly, the author of the text I was looking at used it for her multiple sclerosis symptoms, and they found that it was very beneficial for that. Also beneficial for lupus, myasthenia gravis, Hashimoto's thyroiditis, that's inflammation of the thyroid, Crohn's, irritable bowel syndrome, ulcerative colitis, vasculitis, which is an inflammation of the blood vessels, Guillain-Barré syndrome, rheumatoid arthritis, psoriasis, and celiac disease. So quite a range of inflammatory autoimmune situations that can definitely benefit from the use of reishi, especially in combination with turkey tail and lion's mane. So it has some anti-aging properties and antioxidant properties, very excellent antioxidant source. It's can mitigate oxidative stress significantly. The picture on the right is quite drastic. It's just a nice skin tone versus a non-skin tone, but we have aging that we can't see inside of all of our cells that take place. And it helps to resist or heal, mitigate tissue breakdown and degradation due to oxidative stress. Also has neuroprotective effects, and is indicated as being helpful for Alzheimer's and other nervous system diseases and disorders. So it has some anti-cancer properties that are very beneficial, particularly for people who are fighting cancer. It increases strength and stamina in cancer patients. It aids in prolonging life, primarily through the stamina and strengthening. It, again, enhances or modulates immune function. It has anti-tumor and anti-cancer activities, anti-nausea. So in this way, it's often utilized in conjunction with traditional therapies like radiation and chemo, because those often have nausea as side effects that are quite significant. And it protects the kidneys from the chemo drugs, allows them to function and not be damaged as severely. It's often used in conjunction with turkey tail. So the research article down here in the Journal of Alternative and Complementary Medicine, Ganoderma lucidum, mycelium, and spore extracts as natural adjuvants for immunotherapy from 2005, Chan et al. So that's using the mycelium as opposed to the actual whole fungi fruiting body, but it's also using the spore extracts, which we know that the spore extracts are a very potent and beneficial part or way of using the Rishi's properties. So some other beneficial effects include things that are helpful when people use Reishi on a regular basis: less depression, less fatigue, less anxiety, overall improved quality of life, sense of well-being, and helps adrenal fatigue. So those are some reported benefits of regular use of Reishi. It has anti-microbial, fungal, bacterial, and antiviral effects. So that's quite a host of fighting properties. It regulates the immune system and aids in healing. Helps with wounds, infections, and diseases from getting infected, either from a fungal basis, typically from a bacterial basis for wounds. But it also has some very powerful antiviral effects. HIV, human papillomavirus, herpes simplex 1 and 2, influenza can all be mitigated and minimized with the use of Reishi mushroom. Antibacterial and Streptococcus, Staphylococcus, Salmonella, Bacillus E. coli, and Micrococcus, very beneficial for fighting urinary tract infections. So here's an article from Bioinformation, interaction of ganoderic acid, which is one of the compounds that's found in the Reishi mushroom, on HIV-related target. And it's actually specifically looking at molecular docking studies. So essentially what that means is that in this case with the HIV, it would prevent the HIV from adhering to the cells and causing an infection. So it turns out that that's one of the primary modalities that spike proteins of corona-style viruses affect on the human body by interacting with the ACE2 receptor, which is present on lung tissue, reproductive tissue, and most other tissues of the body as well in various concentrations. But ivermectin seems to function in that docking interruption phase as well by blocking both the spike protein as well as the docking site on the ACE2 receptor. And there's a new drug that's just been being promoted by a pharmaceutical company that essentially does the same thing for like 12 times the price in combination with another patented drug. So the ivermectin is about 8 cents a dose, but then there's dandelion, and dandelion also functions to block up the ACE2 receptor, and you can use that with a simple dandelion tea extract from the leaves, and that has been demonstrated as a ACE2 receptor blocking, basically a molecular docking study blocking spike protein adherence. So that's a real world kind of down to earth present way of using those things. So Reishi in combination with these things could be a very beneficial addition to a health armor from the natural resources that God has given us. So it's also beneficial for the liver, for hepatitis and hormone balance, acne, polycystic ovarian syndrome, prostate. So Reishi has healing effects for the liver. It aids in toxin release that inhibits liver function, accelerates healthy liver cell regeneration. So as the liver cell maybe is damaged, it can help it adapt and recycle itself, promotes liver health or tone and overall vitality, and it's an effective treatment for hepatitis. Helps improve liver function, breaking down and recycling various hormones that are used. Everything goes through the liver, and it grows and decreases in size as needed. And it aids hormone balance. It can aid acne treatment through some forms of acne can actually be the result of toxins trying to leave through the skin. And it can be beneficial for polycystic ovarian syndrome as well as prostate health by having anti-androgen effects. Essentially, androgens are male hormones. Females have testosterone in their bodies as well, but reductions in the amount that are available there and also for prostate cancer sufferers, it can help block those effects. So they see a molecule of testosterone here on the right. So anti-androgen effects from a natural non-toxic source. So beneficial for seizures, restless leg syndrome. So nervous system stress can be reduced by reishi consumption. Seizures and convulsions helps to calm the nervous system and aids the restless leg syndrome. Bronchitis, allergies, and asthma. So respiratory aid, it prevents histamine. So essentially it's an antihistamine, reduces inflammation. For diabetics, it's good news as well. Improves diabetes type 2 symptoms, which is primarily diet related. Helps to lower elevated blood sugar levels. It's also helpful in altitude sickness. So reishi increases blood flow through a number of different modalities, one of those being vasodilation. And by doing that, also increases the oxygen distribution throughout the body and aids altitude sickness, so reduces hypoxia. So essentially improves respiration, reduces dizziness. So a good news for people at altitude, but also can be very helpful for people who just have low oxygen saturation rates in their body due to pulmonary disorders like we're seeing happening now, and pneumonia and things like that. So take prior to being at altitude and then consume during the period that you would be at altitude if you're using it in an altitude type of a situation. So oxygen availability is increased with the use of reishi. So some cardiac benefits: increases oxygenation of the blood, increases blood flow, lowers cholesterol and triglycerides, so the fatty acids. It lowers the LDL, increases the HDL. So typically LDL is diet related and HDL is activity related, but it appears it can be impacted in a positive way with just simply taking the reishi in as a accessory part of your diet. Helps to lower blood pressure, improves heart function, and reduces cardiovascular disease, and actually has been seen to help bring irregular heartbeats back into parity. And then also functions as a vasodilator, which would reduce the blood pressure and increase blood flow. So warning, just a reminder, even though reishi mushrooms are safe, you can eat too much of it. So you don't want to overdo it. Those things should be done in moderation and with sense. You want to use reishi from a reliable source that's not been compromised in its integrity in any way. Consult an expert if you're doing wild harvest. If you're pregnant or breastfeeding, there's no safety data that either direction. There's not really been any safety data associated with reishi mushroom with those who are breastfeeding or pregnant. So just kind of steer away from it would be the recommendation if you're in that situation. And if you have a bleeding disorder, probably better to steer away. And then you don't want to use it prior to surgery because it may interfere with the blood clotting mechanisms that would take place post-surgical. So that's a quick look at the nutritional, edible, and therapeutic benefits of the reishi mushroom.